for ABC News. Good morning, Karen Travers.
Good morning.
So overnight, late last night, New York Times, Washington Post had some interesting stories. Is Donald Trump really floating the idea of trying or thinking about pardoning himself?
That is what the Washington Post was reporting. There have been some subsequent pushback that's not actually happening right now, but certainly the Post with a pretty extensive piece saying that the president's asking advisors to look into what power he has to pardon aides, family members, and potentially even himself with this Russia probe, in connection with the Russia probe.
And then one of the New York Times then had the story that they're trying to dig up dirt on Mueller to sort of cast aspersions on him.
This was interesting. The New York Times and the Washington Post, almost within minutes of each other, publishing stories that have that similar take, that the president's advisors and lawyers are essentially investigating the investigators, looking into special counsel Robert Mueller and his team for what they think could be any potential conflicts of interest that they could use to try and build a case against Mueller to have him removed, or just if the investigation doesn't go in a direction that they like, that they could start dropping out there. And things like that could be, donations to Democratic candidates, work that had been done for Democratic candidates, things like that they say would be a conflict of interest.
I do find that line of questioning interesting, since Donald Trump himself has donated to Democratic candidates.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Washington. It's a small town for the most part. It's an industry town, and you're going to find lawyers who have worked for clients all across the political spectrum, because there are certain experts in D.C. that know how to do government investigations. They know how to work with government lawyers and representing private clients. Perfect example, Jared Kushner's lawyer, Jamie Gorelick, who's since taken a bit of a step back, but one of his attorneys here, she's worked for Democratic clients over the years. She worked in the Clinton White House. She's representing Jared Kushner. So right there, you have a perfect example of how things are not always as black and white as they might seem to be.
Seems like, Karen Travers, over the last couple of days, this Russian conversation, the stories about these two stories about financial dealings with Paul Manafort, it seems like it's been ratcheted up a level in the last couple of days.
Yeah, remember healthcare?
Right.
That whole thing? That feels like a month ago, and I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday at this point. But, there certainly has just been this every day, sometimes multiple times a day, new headlines coming out. And, that's what we're going to see, I think, for some time. How long that is, we don't know, months or years, but just this trickle. And that's what's frustrating the president. It's this daily barrage of headlines and his feeling that they just can't contain anything or get ahead of anything. But I can't see how they could get ahead of anything. The greatest communications team in the world isn't going to stop these stories from coming out.
Well, especially when he sits down with the New York Times for an hour.
Right. For a very, very long, wide-ranging interview where we essentially just get a glimpse into what he is thinking at that moment. It's a pretty incredible interview when you really, we unfortunately tasked one person with reading the full transcript of everything. And it's really long. It's really dense, but it's just so many amazing points that I think we'll come back to later that you just don't see. I've covered a couple of presidents. You don't see them, allowing somebody inside like that as the president does.
No, you really don't.
And I think it's worth noting it's, to him, the fake news New York Times, the failing New York Times, but when he wants to do an extensive interview, who does he call?
That's a great point.
New York Times.
So we're hearing that Donald Trump Jr. and Paul Manafort might not testify. What's going on there?
It's still uncertain. So they've been invited, asked to come up to the Senate Judiciary Committee next Wednesday for a public hearing. Neither are government employees. They say they can testify in front of the full committee in public. But they haven't accepted yet. We haven't heard that just yet. So we will see how that plays out over the weekend. There was, of course, yesterday the threat that was raised of, well, we'll subpoena them if they don't agree on their own to come up here. So we'll see how this plays out. I think nobody's really willing to bet yet how it's going to happen by Wednesday. But if they do public testimony, it'll be pretty interesting.
And then what about healthcare, since it was Tuesday when they came up with the third plan? Where is that now?
They're pushing things to next week and, trying to see where things go. And we still have those threats on the line of nobody's going home for recess until something gets done. The president himself said Congress needs to stay here and work. And the White House was asked, well, what does that mean for him? Is he going to stay here too? He said, well, he didn't really mean it on weekends. I mean, literally, they said he didn't mean weekends, but he will be in town if Congress is here because, the president wants to have a little bit of a summer break too. So we'll see how this goes.
Karen Travers, you'll be there through thick and through thin, no matter what. Thanks for the heads up.
Thank you.
All right, 6:57.